Today we are going to be talking about the famous female artist Artemisia Gentileschi. She was a woman who utilized her feminine perspective to create moving works of art. We will be analyzing and comparing some of her works to other artists. Because of Artemisia's female perspective, she was able to show different emotions and more realistic interpretations in her work than any male artist was doing in the 17th century. Artemisia Gentileschi is known to be the most famous and sought-after female artist of the 17th century, having rich patrons like the Medicis and kings like Charles I of England. Artemisia grew up in Rome and spent much of her time with her father, Orazio Gentileschi, who trained her to paint. While she was growing up, she spent most of her time at home, while many of her father's friends and collaborators would come in and out. Unfortunately, some of these men were not trustworthy, and in 1611 she was raped by the artist by the name of Agostino Tassi, who was collaborating with her father at the time. You can see how this terrible event in her life influenced her work, and we will talk more about this in our analysis. After her assault, there were trials that took place, and all of this is actually documented. After these trials, which she won, she moved to Florence and jumped around Italy until she eventually moved to Naples, where she spent the remainder of her life. In 1635, during the time she was living in Naples, she visited her father in London, where she created many beautiful pieces, and one being a self-portrait we will dive into shortly. The first painting we will be analyzing is her Susanna and Elders painting. This is actually one of her first paintings done when she was 17 years old. During this time, this painting was quite popular and many artists had their own versions, but what makes Artemisia's painting so astonishing is not just how technically mature it is, but also her narrative perspective of this piece. Artemisia can actually relate to Susanna in this painting, and she uses this to her advantage, and because of her own experiences, she is able to convey the real struggle of a woman in this situation. The painting shows two men leering over a wall at a naked woman. Their postures are threatening and lustful. The way the two figures combine into a single form adopts into a broad triangle shape that gives a distinct impression of oppressing Susanna. You can actually see the struggle and physical threat Susanna is feeling in Artemisia's painting just through her body language and how her body is contorted. The other painting we are going to compare is Guido Reni's version. Guido's Susanna is in a more equivocal pose, but also is far less alarmed and fearful than Artemisia's version. There is not a clear emotion from Susanna as there is in Artemisia's. You can tell he doesn't share the same point of view, and it's very interesting to see the difference of a woman's perspective compared to a man's in this piece. The second painting we will be analyzing is Artemisia's Judith beheading Holofernes. This one is probably my favorite of hers. This painting is absolutely brutal, and she does an amazing job using paint to portray such a gruesome scene. What I love the most about Artemisia's version of the painting is again her perspective. She shows the nitty-grittiness of the scene, and she imagines what it must really be like as a woman to do such a task. Whereas if we were to look at Caravaggio's version, which is also quite gruesome, but how he paints Judith is impassive and seen as this very grand heroine. And in his, the maid is seen observing from the side, while in Artemisia's has her assisting and holding down Holofernes' body. The women in this painting look strong and almost vengeful. It's very powerful, and it's an interesting piece that makes you want to look away, but you just can't. The third painting we will be analyzing is Artemisia's portrait as the allegory of painting. This scene captures her leaning over an easel, delicately touching paint onto a large canvas. The angle of her portrait is unique and was definitely not possible to do with a normal front-facing mirror, and is believed to have been done in an alternative method. This painting can be interpreted as an allegorical painting. Traditionally, the art of painting has always been symbolized by the female figure, meaning no male artist would have ever been able to work in this way. You can see she is dressed fairly elegantly for someone painting. Some people believe she is incorporating the character of Judith from the story of Judith slaying the Holofernes as a means of giving herself her own form of justice over her past assault as a young girl. This portrait can be interpreted in so many different ways, and another interpretation is that the painting is not so much a self-portrait but an embodiment of what Artemisia believes painting should be, which is a very physical and purposeful act, and she personifies it as a woman. In all, it's a very powerful painting of a woman dressed so femininely and strong, having grit and ready to take on her next masterpiece. Very fitting with one of Artemisia's own quotes, "Let me show you what a woman can do." Artemisia was a powerful painter who looked through the female perspective in her art, and against all odds she built a reputation as one of Europe's most sought-after artists. Her art stands out from the rest for a reason. She was able to take her own dark past and turn it into beautiful works of art that are admired today. She is a feminist icon to many, and now even myself. She was doing what other artists weren't able to do because many artists were predominantly male. To end this presentation, I'd like to leave you with another famous quote of Artemisia's. "You will find the spirit of Caesar in the soul of a woman."